On November 13, 2008, James Donald replied to Satoshi's remarks on how nodes work to prevent double spending. In this long email, the Byzantine generals problem is brought up for the first time ever in Bitcoin history by James. The Byzantine generals problem is a classic concept in computer science, especially in distributed systems, that addresses the issue of reaching consensus in a network where some participants, or nodes, may be unreliable or malicious. Here's how it applies in the context of Bitcoin. Imagine a scenario where multiple generals are spread out around an enemy city. They need to agree on a coordinated plan of attack, but can only communicate by messenger. Some of the generals, or messengers, may be traitors who will try to confuse or mislead the others, making it difficult to reach a unified decision. The problem lies in ensuring that all loyal generals agree on the same plan, even in the presence of traitors. In Bitcoin, the network is decentralized, and participant nodes don't inherently trust each other, since they can receive the same data from multiple peer nodes to double-check information that is self-verifying by its mathematical nature. This lack of trust between nodes mirrors the Byzantine generals problem, where some nodes may act maliciously or send conflicting information to disrupt consensus. Bitcoin addresses this problem in several ways. First, with proof of work, Bitcoin's consensus algorithm requires nodes, or who we now call miners, solve a mathematical puzzle to validate transactions and add blocks of transactions to the blockchain. This process is computationally expensive and resource-intensive, making it difficult for malicious actors to alter the blockchain without a majority of the network's computing power. But even though it's expensive to produce new blocks, it's very, very cheap to verify them as valid proofs of work by Bitcoin node runners. Second, Bitcoin's distributed ledger is held by all 75,000 Bitcoin nodes all over the world who maintain a copy of the blockchain, and consensus on the longest chain is reached when the majority of nodes accept a newly mined block as valid. If any minority miner or node tries to add a fraudulent block with double-spent coins, it will be rejected by the rest of the network, ensuring that only legitimate transactions are recorded. Third, in Bitcoin, the longest chain of blocks with the most proof of work is considered the valid one. This means that if a malicious actor tries to create an alternative version of the blockchain, they would need to continuously outpace the honest miner's block production, which is practically infeasible due to the cost and difficulty of being a majority of the hash power on the network. Currently, the Bitcoin network hash rate is at an all-time high of 755 billion terahashes a second, distributed over thousands of locations, several dozen countries, and mining pools. Bitcoin's solution and the Byzantine generals problem doesn't prevent malicious actors from attempting to interfere, but it makes successful attacks prohibitively expensive and unlikely by aligning incentives. Miners are incentivized to act honestly because they are rewarded with Bitcoin for valid mining, while dishonest behavior is likely to result in lost resources with no reward. Thus, Bitcoin's consensus mechanism achieves reliable coordination in a trustless, decentralized network, solving the Byzantine generals problem by ensuring that all non-malicious nodes agree on the true order of transactions and state of the blockchain. Digressing, here is James's email to Satoshi, where he mentions the Byzantine generals problem for the first time in Bitcoin's history. Quote,
"That is not the question I am asking. It is not trust that worries me. It is how it is possible to have a globally shared view, even if everyone is well behaved. The process for arriving at a globally shared view of who owns what BitGold coins is insufficiently specified. Once specified, then we can start considering whether everyone has incentives to behave correctly. It is not sufficient that everyone knows X. We also need everyone to know that everyone knows X, and that everyone knows that everyone knows that everyone knows X, which, as in the Byzantine generals problem, is the classic hard problem of distributed data processing. This problem becomes harder when X is quite possibly a very large amount of data. agreement on who was the owner of every bit gold coin at such and such a time. And then, on top of that, we need everyone to have a motive, to behave in such a fashion that agreement arises. I cannot see that they have motive when I do not know the behavior to be motivated. You keep repeating your analysis of the system under attack. We cannot say how the system will behave under attack until we know how the system is supposed to behave when not under attack. If there are a lot of transactions, it is hard to efficiently discover the discrepancies between one node's view and another node's view. And because new transactions are always arriving, no two nodes will ever have the same view, even if all nodes are honest and all reported transactions are correct and true single spends. We should be able to accomplish a system where two nodes are likely to come to agreement as to who owned what bit gold coins at some very recent past time. But it is not simple to do so. If one node constructs a hash that represents its knowledge of who owned what bit gold coins at a particular time, and another node wants to check that hash, it is not simple to do it in such a way that agreement is likely and disagreement between honest, well-behaved nodes is efficiently detected and efficiently resolved. And if we had a specification of how agreement is generated, it is not obvious why the second node has incentive to check that hash. The system has to work in such a way that nodes can easily and cheaply change their opinion about recent transactions, so as to reach consensus. But in order to provide finality and irreversibility, once consensus has been reached, and then new stuff has been piled on top of old consensus, in particular new bit gold has been piled on top of old consensus, it then becomes extremely difficult to go back and change what was decided. Saying that is how it works does not give us a method to make it work that way. Furthermore, in regards to your comments on how the receiver of a payment must wait an hour or so before believing that a transaction is valid, and that the network will resolve any possible double-spend races by then. You keep discussing attacks. I find it hard to think about response to attack when it is not clear to me what normal behavior is, in the case of good conduct by each and every party. Distributed databases are hard, even when all the databases perfectly follow the will of a single owner. Messages get lost. Links drop, synchronization delays become abnormal, and entire machines go up in flames. And the network as a whole has to take all this in its stride. Figuring out how to do this is hard, even in the complete absence of attacks. Then, when we have figured out how to handle all this, then come attacks.
On the same day, Satoshi sent back this response. Quote, "The proof-of-work chain is a solution to the Byzantine general's problem." I'll try to rephrase it in that context. A number of Byzantine generals each have a computer and want to attack the king's Wi-Fi by brute forcing the password, which they've learned is a certain number of characters in length. Once they stimulate the network to generate a packet, they must crack the password within a limited time to break in and erase the logs, otherwise they will be discovered and get in trouble. They only have enough CPU power to crack it fast enough if a majority of them attack at the same time. They don't particularly care when the attack will be, just that they all agree. It has been decided that anyone who feels like it will announce a time, and whatever time is heard first will be the official attack time. The problem is that the network is not instantaneous, and if two generals announce different attack times at close to the same time, some may hear one first, and others hear the other first. They use a proof-of-work chain to solve the problem. Once each general receives whatever attack time he hears first, he sets his computer to solve an extremely difficult proof-of-work problem that includes the attack time in its hash. The proof of work is so difficult it's expected to take 10 minutes of them all working at once before one of them finds a solution. Once one of the generals finds a proof of work, he broadcasts it to the network, and everyone changes their current proof of work computation to include that proof of work in the hash they're working on. If anyone was working on a different attack time, they switch to this one because its proof of work chain is now longer. After 2 hours, one attack time should be hashed by a chain of 12 proofs of work. Every general, just by verifying the difficulty of the proof of work chain, can estimate how much parallel CPU power per hour was expended on it, and see that it must have required the majority of the computers to produce that much proof of work in the allotted time. They had to all have seen it because the proof of work is proof that they worked on it. If the CPU power exhibited by the proof of work chain is sufficient to crack the password, they can safely attack at the agreed time. The proof of work chain is how all the synchronization, distributed database, and global view problems you've asked about are solved.
If you want to support more of this kind of content, visit shopbitcoin.shop.